What's up, boxing fans? I'm Michael Montero for Boxing Monthly. You're watching the Neutral Corner for the week of April 15th. Really good piece in the April issue of Boxing Monthly by Luke G. Williams, who always does great work, on one Mr. Andrzej Ward. Andrzej S.O.G. Ward. Interesting piece, and there's a lot of stuff in there with Andrzej that is likable and humble. Doesn't always come across like that in public, but it seems to be in person he comes off that way. Man, Andrzej Ward is a complicated guy. And there's just a lot of layers to him. I just don't particularly love the way he handles himself sometimes outside the ring in terms of how he deals with the media and the fans. But, you know, you can't deny the guy's talent. You also can't deny the guy's prerogative to live his life the way he wants to. But make sure you check that out. Of course, there's a lot of Joshua Klitschko stuff in this issue. But I thought that piece by Luke G. Williams on Andrzej Ward was really, really good stuff. Let's get into some news and notes. So we have the ratings from HBO's Ukrainian Invasion triple header last Saturday. I did a rant video about this, just released that as just a few minutes before I'm recording this. So check that out for all the details. But just so you know, that card for HBO, it peaked at 886,000 viewers during the main event. The whole thing averaged over 750,000 viewers throughout the whole triple header. And that is not only the best rating for HBO, regular HBO boxing this year, but the best of all of premium cable. The best Showtime card was the Adrian Broner-Adrian Granados fight, which peaked at 859,000. So almost as much. When you consider the fact that HBO is in millions more homes than Showtime, I would still say that Broner-Granados rating is better than the Lomachenko-Sosa rating. So again, I just did a video detailing all that stuff, so check out that rant video. The major news this week was that Gennady Golovkin and his team, they haven't really made an official announcement, but it's being reported, and there should be an official announcement probably next week, by the end of this week or next week, from K2 Promotions, that Triple G will not be fighting in June. They are pretty much going to hold out and see if they can get it done with Canelo Alvarez, should he be successful against Chavez in their fight May 6th. They want that eventual Canelo-Golovkin fight in September, that premium date. I think it's September 17th, don't quote me, but right in the middle of that month, around the Mexican holiday. You know, that May date and that September date, they're always big blockbusters in boxing. So there's a few rumors going around. It'll be interesting to see what K2 says, but some recent interviews with Abel Sanchez seems to indicate that Golovkin was just kind of sore. And look, he's 35 years old, you know, but he was sore after that fight with Daniel Jacobs. And I think a lot of fans and media simply didn't give Jacobs enough credit for some of the leather he did put on Golovkin. Golovkin didn't have a lot of marks on his face, but Jacobs did land some shots, particularly late in that fight. Some good body shots too. And I think that him being a much bigger guy than Golovkin, punching down at him, that was a 12-round fight that was tougher than a lot of people realize when you really, really dissect it and look at what was happening in there. I think that wear and tear, there must have been some sort of injury for Golovkin. That's been the rumor. Of course, Frank Warren was quoted in an interview, I think, last week. But I don't think there's an official injury that requires surgery or something like that. We'd know about it by now. It's probably a nagging type of injury that just requires rest. And I think that does go, it comes from the fact that Golovkin is 35 years old. He's been boxing now competitively for 20 years, if you go back to the junior amateurs, right? He had hundreds of amateur fights and he's had dozens of pro fights now. He's had countless training camps. Okay, so the wear and tear in his body is starting to show. And then I do think that Jacobs did some good work in their fight last month. And I think that had an effect as well. And maybe they just felt, all things considered with Billy Joe Saunders and some of the hiccups they were having, Saunders is a complete lunatic. And I think dealing with him and all the madness there, combined with the fact that maybe there are some nagging injuries, some soreness, more than was expected. And maybe sometimes it's like when you work out and maybe the day after, let's say you do legs, let's say you go to the gym and you're doing deadlifts, squats, right? You're doing the leg press. And the day after, you don't really feel that sore, but sometimes it's that second, even that third day where you get that deep muscle soreness, right? Kind of like that sometimes in boxing and sports like American football, stuff like that, where as you get older, that wear and tear takes a little longer to even show up, a little longer to recover from. And that's what this sounds like. We don't really have all the details yet. Again, K2 will officially announce something, I'm sure, in the next week or so. But it just seems to me that Team Golovkin wants to take a little bit of a rest, and they're not going to fight over the summer. It's a damn shame because HBO Boxing really could have used that rating, because that Golovkin-Saunders fight would have been from Kazakhstan, so the foreign TV rights would have been very, very cheap, and HBO would have put that under regular air. So in June, you would have had regular HBO Boxing, Golovkin and Saunders, and then you would have had Miguel Cotto, probably against Yoshihiro Kamagai. I think that date is June 24th. So you would have had 2 good dates of regular HBO Boxing non-pay-per-view, and then in between that, I think you have, don't quote me, I think it's the Terrence Crawford card. I think that's who's fighting in between that. So you would have had 3 weeks in a row of some good stuff right there, right? Oh no, I'm sorry, it's the Kovalev-Ward rematch on June 17th, but the replay would have been, or that replay is going to be on the following week on that Cotto card. So you would have had 3 weeks in a row where there'd be some action on HBO, right? And all of that all around a pay-per-view. Generally speaking, when you have a card right before and right after a pay-per-view, it helps jump up the pay-per-view numbers a little bit. So it's kind of a buzzkill. Anytime Triple G isn't fighting on regular HBO, it's a buzzkill for that network. It's a buzzkill for the sport. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what we hear. Hopefully that fight with Canelo Alvarez, should everything go smoothly with him in May, happens, because that's the big fight that needs to happen this year for 2017, which is off to an amazing start, but you got to have that signature fight. And the Kovalev-Ward rematch isn't it. That signature crossover fight, that's Canelo Golovkin. So hopefully that happens. Talking about more summer fights, Adonis Stevenson is now rematching Andrzej Fonfara, June 3rd in Canada, probably Montreal, could be Quebec City. But look, these two fought in May of 2014. It was an entertaining scrap. Stevenson started very well, and Fonfara kind of grew up in that fight and finished stronger. And down the stretch was giving Stevenson some issues. And after that, he went on to win a couple of good fights. He upset Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. I believe that fight was at 168. And then he fought, it was a UK fighter, Nathan Cleverly. Good, entertaining fight, won that one, right? And a lot of people wanted to see a rematch between Stevenson and Fonfara. A rematch should have happened either in late 2015 or early 2016, but it didn't. Stevenson and the fuckery with his management. Eventually, Fonfara went up against Joe Smith Jr. in June of 2016, and he took a huge KO loss. That was the upset of the year, really. And it was a TKO in the first round. Now, he's come back. He's won a fight since then. He came back and fought Chad Dawson recently. Didn't look good in that fight in the beginning, but came back and won it and pretty much retired Chad Dawson. He's been retired since he fought Andre Ward a few years ago. But now Fonfara is going to rematch Adonis Stevenson. What does Andrzej Fonfara have left at this point? I don't know. He's gotten with a new team. I think he's been training with Virgil Hunter and those guys up in the Bay Area. Is that giving him a new look? I don't know. Can you really change what Andrzej Fonfara is and make him more of a boxer? I don't know. Is the outcome of this fight any different than the first one? I don't know. What I do know is the momentum from that first fight which by the time this rematch happens would have been 3 years prior. That momentum's gone. And this is just another case of a missed opportunity, I feel, for Adonis Stevenson and his team. This rematch would have been a hot seller a year and a half ago. Now, I'm not so sure. Does anyone really want to see this? I mean, I'm interested because I think Fonfara will bring it. If he does score an upset here, it shakes up the light heavyweight division, but you probably have to expect Stevenson will win another decision here. Another fight on July 1st. That is official. It was on, it was off, now it's back on and official. Signed, sealed, done, delivered. Manny Pacquiao, Jeff Horn. July 1st, Brisbane, Australia. No TV set yet here in the United States. That will be decided over the next few weeks. But you have to think, if it does go to premium cable, it probably goes to HBO. I don't know if HBO, the executives there, want to work with Manny Pacquiao because of his political leanings and stuff. I've talked about that before. There's a lot of agendas going on with the people running HBO boxing, or I'm sorry, HBO, the network. And they're, of course, the bosses of the people running HBO boxing. But if they do, this should not be a pay-per-view. This should be a fight that's on regular HBO because it's going to be live from Australia, and those foreign licensing fees are much, much cheaper. So HBO should have it in their budget. And you have to wonder, look, later this month, there's a nice triple header that Top Rank is putting on at the StubHub Center, headlined with Oscar Valdez. And I've been very vocal in my disappointment that HBO did not pick that card up. But maybe they knew something going on in the background related to this thing with Manny Pacquiao and Jeff Horn, and maybe they were holding out to buy that fight. Maybe they're holding out to buy this fight. The TV in America still has not yet been decided on this fight, believe it or not. But maybe HBO is holding out for this Pacquiao Horn thing, and that they wanted to reallocate some of that money and put it toward that fight. I don't love this matchup. I don't think it's very competitive. I think that it's a complete whitewash. I think Pacquiao probably stops Jeff Horn. I do think Horn will go for it and take chances, and that's why I favor Pacquiao to stop him. But it's a mandatory fight for his WBO title. It does big business. It's going to do a crowd of over 50,000 over there. It's going to build boxing over there as a brand. There's a growing market in Australia when you look at fighters like Joseph Parker, right? So Kostya Tszyu's son is starting to fight now. Pacquiao's going to be coming off an 8-month layoff. Jeff Horn's going to be coming off a 7-month layoff. How much will that ring rust affect them? I think at this stage of Pacquiao's career, ring rust really doesn't hurt him. I think he's forgotten more about boxing than Jeff Horn will ever know. I think the layoff affects Jeff Horn more. And I look for Pacquiao to come out guns blazing here. Maybe there's a competitive round or two in the beginning. He takes over in the middle rounds and gets a stoppage. That's what should happen. That's it for news and notes this week, guys. Let's talk about everything that happened last week around the world. Last Tuesday in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, there was a Fox Sports 1 card. It was PBC and Fox Sports 1. Edner Cherry scores a unanimous decision in a 10-rounder over Omar Douglas. Edner Cherry seems like he's been around forever. A consistent quality TV fighter at that level. You know, he was on ESPN back during Friday Night Fights. He's kind of on that level, and he always entertained, did a good job. Went pro in 2001. He's always fought between 130 and 140 pounds. And of course, anytime he stepped up, you know, he got beat, but he was always competitive. So just a fighter, an example of, you know, we need those kind of guys in boxing to fill dates like that and to serve at those lower tier fight cards. At some point, you'd hope that the brass at PBC puts Edner Cherry in there with some of the prospects they're trying to build up, so we can see, are these prospects for real or not? Because Edner Cherry is one of those guys that's going to test the prospect, and we're going to get to see early on. Let's not wait till a guy's got 20, 25 fights. Let's put a guy with 10 fights in there with Edner Cherry and see what happens. On Saturday, there was a bunch of boxing, okay? In Cancun, Mexico, Christian Mijares scores a 10-round decision win over Thomas Rojas. Mijares is still a name in Mexico. This guy went pro a long time ago. I talked about that last week. He went pro at like 15, 16 years old. Seems he's been fighting forever, even longer than Edner Cherry. And he came in at 130 pounds for this fight. He did have the WBC silver featherweight title. I think he won it last year. He defended it late last year. Came into this fight at 130 pounds. So I guess now he's going to campaign at 130. He's kind of bounced around in a few different weights in recent years. He's one of those guys that can fight in Mexico, still does a pretty good gate down there, still does a pretty good rating. He does numbers down there. Expect him to be in some more fights like this year. Is he going to be back on American TV or anything like that anytime soon? I doubt it. In Manchester, Terry Flanagan scores a unanimous decision over Petr Petrov to improve to 33-0 with 13 knockouts, defending his WBO title, lightweight title. Talking about possibly Vasyl Lomachenko next. His promoter Frank Warren welcomes that fight. Vasyl Lomachenko, who we'll talk about in a second, has stated that their goal is to win 3 world titles within 10 fights. Well, he's had 9 pro fights. So possibly for that 10th pro fight, they'd want to move up 5 pounds and fight Terry Flanagan to grab that title. What was cool about this fight is that it was streamed live by Banner Promotions on Twitter. So if you had Twitter from anywhere in the world, if you had a Twitter account, you could go to Banner Promotions' Twitter page and watch a damn fight. How cool is that? And for me, with my phone, I have the app or whatever where I don't do it, Tiffany does it. I have no idea how she does it, but she takes what's on the phone and puts it on the TV. So we were watching a Twitter stream on TV, and it was a really good stream, man. It was a better stream than some of these other promoters who are charging for streams have put on recently. I'm talking pay-per-view stuff. This was free on Twitter. All that being said, wasn't the best fight. Terry Flanagan just isn't a very exciting fighter. The scores, got to talk about this. Terry O'Connor, who I think reffed the co-main event, scored the fight 116-112 for Flanagan. I thought that was a good score. I thought that was a quality score. But a Hungarian judge, Zoltan Gennady, scored the fight 118-110. That's a bad score. But even worse, a Swedish judge, Mikael Hook, scored it 120-108 for Terry Flanagan. There's no damn way Flanagan won all 12 rounds of that fight. No damn way. So just 2 horrible scores. The UK judge scored this fight correctly. So for those of you saying it was home cooking, it was the 2 foreign judges that screwed it up. It was the domestic judge that got the right call. But Terry Flanagan from here, okay, maybe he fights Vasyl Lomachenko. He would absolutely be shredded in that fight. Wouldn't even be competitive, but it'd get him paid. I think that would do. Frank Warren's shows aren't anywhere near the level of Eddie Hearn's shows, but Frank Warren does put on some good shows. This did a pretty good crowd. I'm sure it did a pretty decent rating. If they brought Vasyl Lomachenko over there, especially the way the UK fans love boxers, love craftsmen, I think that fight would do a really big gate. I think it'd sell out a venue over there and do a pretty good, whether it's a pay-per-view or whatever, it'd do a good rating over there. So maybe that happens. If he doesn't fight Lomachenko, if he fights any of the other 135-pound titleists, and a couple of them are fighting coming up, we'll talk about that, but if he fights any of the other guys in the division, I just don't see much out of Terry Flanagan. He's one of these guys that has a title in the age where it's not that hard to get a title. I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. It's hard in boxing to train and to get to that level where you're fighting for titles. But yeah, this is just one of those titles that's paper thin to me, and I just don't see much there. This was a good quality win for Flanagan. Petr Petrov is a good, solid lightweight, very experienced. I just don't see anything elite out of Flanagan. And if he steps up to that elite class, I don't see him doing very well. So does he cash out against one of those guys? Or does he milk this title some more? That remains to be seen. In the co-main, Liam Smith scores a win over Liam Williams. It was the battle of the Liams. It was a retirement after the 9th round. Williams got a really nasty headbutt, a cut on his right eyelid, I think it was, the result of a headbutt in the 9th round. purely accidental. Both guys got cut in this fight. There was accidental clash of heads a few times, and both of them got cut. But this cut over the right eyelid for Williams was really, really bad. And it prompted his trainer, Gary Lockett, to stop the fight after the 9th round when Williams came back into the corner. Lockett said, no, you're not going out there. I like that stoppage by Lockett. And the thing is, Williams really didn't complain about it. Now, here's the controversy about it, okay? All 3 judges had Williams ahead 86-85 at the time of the stoppage. It should be said that Smith was coming on a little bit in the last couple rounds before it was stopped. I thought Williams started very, very good. Williams came in for this fight at 152.5 pounds. Smith came in overweight, 155.5 pounds. Missed weight. So the interim WBO junior middleweight title was on the line for Williams only. Was there a factor there where maybe Smith was affected by the extra weight? Was he looked sluggish early on? Was there issues in camp? I don't know. But Williams started well, but Smith kept putting pressure on him, and this was a good, solid action fight. And Smith was landing body shots, slowing Williams down, and it really, really looked like over the next few rounds, in the late rounds of that fight, Smith was possibly going to get a stoppage. Either that, or he was going to pull out the championship rounds and win a clear decision. That's what I saw. So the controversy is that when the fight was stopped, Williams was ahead. So some fans would want to see a rematch. I think that Smith was on his way to winning this fight, either by late TKO or by decision. But because it was a good action fight, because of the way that the fight ended, I do think a rematch is warranted. And I think that we're going to see the promoter put that on over there. And I think that people will be interested in that fight. Smith did talk about his difficulty making weight. Can he make 154 anymore? You know, is there something that happened in camp that he can adjust again and make 154 again? Or is he going to move to 160 pounds? I think he's going to have a tough time against the best at 160 pounds because he just doesn't have the power. But he's going to always make for entertaining fights. If he can make 154 again, expect a rematch here. Okay, now, in the United States on Saturday, at the MGM National Harbor, the brand new arena there in Oxon Hill, Maryland, which is in the Washington, D.C. area. It was the Ukrainian Invasion. And I talked a little bit about the ratings. I'm not going to go into all that. But the Oleksandrs started off the night. Oleksandr Usyk kicked things off, scoring a unanimous decision over Michael Hunter. All 3 judges had it 117-110 to defend his WBO 200-pound title. He scored a knockdown in the 12th round. Hunter didn't actually hit the canvas, but he backed into the ropes, and the referee correctly called it a knockdown because the ropes held him up. There's a lot of controversy about the ref not stopping the fight in the 12th round. And I tweeted about this, I thought that Hunter was trying to survive. He was punching back. He was rolling with a lot of those punches. He was kind of drunk because some of them were landing. But I don't know if it was up to the ref to stop the fight there. I think it was up to the corner to stop the fight. And I think that if the corner would have thrown in the towel in that 12th round, nobody would have complained. That was one of those instances where the ref is looking. He's right up in front of the fighter. He can see the fighter's eyes, and he can see, is this guy concussed or not? Michael Hunter was not concussed. I didn't see. We saw a guy in the next fight, Yunieski Gonzalez, badly concussed. I'll talk about that in a second. Didn't see that from Michael Hunter. He was still trying to survive. He would have been better suited to take a knee, would have been much better suited to frickin' hold on a little bit. But I think the ref let him go. He let him continue because he was like, look, man, this guy's got a half a round left. He's fought a good competitive fight, done well for himself. I'm going to give him a chance. The corner should have stepped in and been brave there. I don't necessarily think there was enough there for the ref to stop that fight. If he did, I don't think any of us would be complaining, but I think some people would be saying, he didn't need to stop it. I don't know, man. It's one of those things where there's really no right answer. Everyone's different, and the trauma affects some guys really, really badly, and some guys recover from it, and they're the same dude after taking licking like that. The one thing I saw with Usyk, his punches weren't very heavy. Look at Michael Hunter's face after that fight. There's hardly a mark on it. So it's not as if he was taking this prolonged beating with these heavy, heavy punches from a heavy-handed fighter. Punches were landing. He was getting moved around, but I didn't see him taking really, really crazy punishment to where he's not going to be the same guy afterwards. That's what I saw. Now, real quick about Usyk, who 2 minutes into this broadcast, Max Kellerman was saying is the most talented fighter north of 175 pounds. Both of these guys would have something to say about that. Both of these guys knock Usyk out within 6 rounds, 7 rounds. I like Oleksandr Usyk, but he's a prospect. I believe this was his 12th pro fight or something. He's still a prospect, guys. I talk about this all the time. In the age of titles being handed out like candy, there's a lot of guys out there who are prospects with titles. Now, in the case of people like Guillermo Rigondeaux, Vasyl Lomachenko, those guys are more than prospects with titles. Those guys were never prospects. After the amateur careers they had, they were never prospects. Maybe their first 1 or 2 fights, they were prospects as pros. And then they graduated from that. But these other fighters, like Oleksandr Usyk, I know he had hundreds of amateur fights as well, but you can see the learning curve here. He's got a lot to improve on. I'm not ready to anoint him. He's probably the best cruiserweight. He hasn't proven that yet. He's beat one top 10 cruiserweight, right? He hasn't proven he's the top guy yet. He needs to fight some of the other top, I'm talking top 5 cruiserweights, unified titles, before we anoint him the best cruiserweight. I don't see anything there that says this guy is going to be a heavyweight champion or even a competitive heavyweight against the likes of Joshua, Klitschko, even a Luis Ortiz, Deontay Wilder. I think he'd box circles around Deontay Wilder for several rounds until that first big shot landed. There's just nothing there as far as elite level power. Now maybe Usyk can learn to sit down on his punches more. He still fights amateurish in a way where he doesn't really sit down on the punches. But I like a lot of what Usyk does. You could tell in this fight, he wanted to step on the gas pedal and get Hunter out of there. He was trying to do it. He smothers a lot of his power. His footwork could be better. He could cut the ring off better. He could shoot his punches straighter. He could turn over on them more. There's things he could work on. Maybe if he smooths some of that stuff out, he becomes a better professional, his power increases. Maybe there's some potential down the line for what we could call an elite level pound for pound type of talent. Potential's there, but there's a lot that needs to be developed. Still, even with all that, the guy doesn't need to move to heavyweight. The biggest problem with the cruiserweight division is we haven't had a consistent champion stay there, set a precedent, and own that division for years, the way Golovkin's doing at middleweight right now, the way Klitschko did at heavyweight in recent years. You've had guys stay in divisions, clean them out, win all the belts, and defend those belts time after time after time, right? It was Evander Holyfield being the champ, and then he moved up, and it's just been a mess ever since. Usyk is a guy that has the potential where he could maybe be the man at cruiserweight for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years, then cash out for a fight or two at heavyweight like Tony Bellew just did. That's the path I think they should take with Oleksandr Usyk. But what about the other Oleksandr? Oleksandr Gvozdyk. He scored the win of the night over Yunieski Gonzalez, 3rd round TKO. This fight was really over in the 2nd round. I thought this was a great, great breakthrough performance for the Nail. I think I mentioned this in last week's TNC. Recently did a episode of 10 Count for Undisputed Champion Network with Douglas Fisher and Steve Kim. And we were previewing this card. And I thought both of those guys, Steve and Doug, were sleeping a little bit on Oleksandr Gvozdyk, who I call the top 10 light heavyweight. I said it right there. After his win against Isaac Chilemba, he was a top 10 light heavyweight. Now after this fight, I'm doubling down on that. He's already a top 10 light heavyweight. He's an example of a guy that, might not have dozens and dozens of fights, but he's already a contender. He's already a top level guy ready to challenge for a title. Now, is he ready for Sergey Kovalev, for Andre Ward? No. I think he's ready for Adonis Stevenson, the winner between the Stevenson-Fonfara rematch. I think he's ready for that guy. He's in line possibly to fight Joe Smith Jr. later this year. I think he's ready for Joe Smith Jr. So I think he's ready for that level. You know, you might not be ready for those 2 elite level fighters in the division, but just under it, those top fighters, you know, the 3rd, 4th, 5th spot in the division, Gvozdyk is ready to challenge them right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the year, he gets a Joe Smith Jr. or somebody on that level, and maybe next year, early next year, he's challenging for a title. Now, can he try to position himself to get in line for the WBC and maybe go after Adonis Stevenson if he still has that title early next year? Yes. Is that the path they want to take? Maybe. Because I don't know if it depends on what happens in the Kovalev-Ward rematch, right? If Andre Ward wins, I think that Gvozdyk and his team are going to go straight ahead towards Andre Ward and try to get that fight. If Sergey Kovalev wins, I don't know if they want to go right after Sergey Kovalev, right? Igis Klimas is representing all these guys. He's their advisor. He's kind of the Al Heyman in that world. Does he want to put 2 of his guys against each other like that? I don't know. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out with him. But this was a breakthrough performance. Now, what they need to do at HBO is get this guy back on TV again. And by the way, I included Oleksandr Usyk in that. He needs to be back on again. Neither guy took real punishment in their fight. Usyk had kind of a grueling, long fight, but there's no reason why these guys shouldn't be fighting again on HBO air, maybe by September, October, November, at least once more this year. You'd love to see him fight over the summer. If that could happen, if they could fight in July or August or something, that'd be great. But they should at least be on regular HBO once more this year. Get them on twice if you can. And that brings me to Vasyl Lomachenko, who scores a 9th round retirement win over Jason Sosa to defend his WBO junior lightweight title. During this broadcast, there was a lot of salivating about Lomachenko being the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. I've been talking about this on various platforms. I think the #1 pound-for-pound spot right now is vacant. Vasyl Lomachenko might be the guy, but he's got 9 pro fights, okay? So it's just too soon, guys. He tuned up Jason Sosa and looked awesome, but Jason Sosa was the #10 ranked heavyweight going into this fight. His last 3 opponents, since he's moved up to 130, have been solid top 10 130 pounders. Yes, and he dominated them. He didn't lose a second of any of those 3 fights against Martinez, Walters, and now Sosa. Yes, but I don't know if any 3 of those fighters I would call elite. Maybe Walters at his best was, but not anymore, right? So he's doing what he's supposed to do. But his team's talking about moving up to 135 and maybe fighting Terry Flanagan, which I understand for money purposes and for grabbing another title, but it's a meaningless paper title. I'm hearing people saying he needs to move up to 135 and fight Mikey Garcia, which because of the managerial situation, the promotional situation, isn't going to happen. That's a fight that's going to be extraordinarily difficult to make. And if it does happen, it ain't going to happen for another couple years, guys. So pump the brakes on that shit. I'm hearing people say he needs to move up to 140 and fight Terrence Crawford. Terrence Crawford is way too freaking big for Lomachenko, who could make 126 right now if he wanted to. If any of those guys at featherweight would be willing to fight him. If I'm managing Vasyl Lomachenko, if I'm Igis Klimas, if I'm top rank, I am having him fight 3 times a year on regular HBO, not pay-per-view. I'm going after an Orlando Salido rematch this summer, even if you got to pay out money to where you lose money on the fight. If Bob Arum has to lose money to get Orlando Salido to sign the dotted line and do that damn rematch, do that over the summer. You could do that here at StubHub Center. It's a sellout. You could do it in Chicago, which has a big Ukrainian, Polish, Eastern European, Slavic presence there. And Bob Arum has said he wants to take Lomachenko to Chicago. There's a heavy Mexican population there too. So a Lomachenko-Salido fight, rematch, this summer in Chicago makes sense. Meanwhile, Berkelt and Miura are fighting this summer as well. Go after the winner of that fight in the fall. If Vasyl Lomachenko can get Jason Sosa, Orlando Salido, and the Berkelt-Miura winner, which is going to be Miguel Berkelt, if he can get those three fighters this year, dominate all three of those, if he gets Berkelt, he takes another title. He unifies titles at 130 and establishes a lineage there as the linear champ. That's probably Fighter of the Year type honors. He'd definitely be a candidate for it. And that would be a brand building thing, right? I talked about the numbers being about 880 some odd thousand viewers tuning in. That was the peak viewership for this fight. If they do what I'm talking about, if he fights Sosa, that does over 1 million views live. And then later this year, he fights Berkelt, that's over 1 million viewers again. HBO Boxing needs that. And if you're Top Rank and you're trying to build a brand with Vasyl Lomachenko, you need that. That is the way this should be done. The people at Top Rank know what they're doing. The people at HBO don't, but the people at Top Rank do. So let's see what happens with all of this. But pound for pound number one, pump the brakes. Move up to 130, 140, pump the brakes, guys. Vasyl Lomachenko is basically a featherweight fighting at 130 pounds right now. Let's chill out and let him do some more work in that division. Sunday, there was a fight here in Los Angeles, another Fox Sports 1 PBC card. This was at the Novo at LA Live. The headliner, Alejandro Luna, scores a 10-round unanimous decision over Andrzej Klimov. Klimov was cut from a headbutt in the 4th round. Luna is now 22-0 with 15 knockouts. So Fox Sports 1 had 2 different cards on that week. A lot of boxing last week. Some good stuff there. Let's talk about what's coming up this week. This Friday, April 14th, we've got some action here on the West Coast and some on the East Coast. On the East Coast, MGM National Harbor, that same arena where they had the Ukrainian invasion last Saturday. Dmitry Bivol is fighting Samuel Clarkston. That is the headliner of a Showtime card. So that's going to be Shobox Friday night. Make sure you check that out. And then here in LA, from Belasco Theater, it's LA Fight Club. These are always a lot of fun, free streaming. So fire up the YouTube and watch that stuff. This one's headlined by Ivan Delgado fighting Charles Huerta. For those of you who have Estrella TV, it will be on Estrella TV. That's a Spanish language network. And again, those LA Fight Club cards, always a good time. On Saturday, another Frank Warren card from Glasgow, Scotland. Ricky Burns putting his WBA title on the line against Julius Indongo, putting his IBF title on the line. So these are 140 pounders unifying titles. Ricky Burns, 41-5-1, 14 knockouts. Julius Indongo, 21-0, 11 knockouts. Indongo is a year older, actually, than Burns. He's 34 years old. Burns is 33, but Burns has been fighting a lot longer. Went pro in 2001, has boxed 361 professional rounds. Indongo went pro in 2009, went pro at an advanced age. He's only boxed 113 rounds. So even though he's a year older, he's way, way fresher than Burns. He's also slightly bigger guy. He's maybe an inch or so taller, an inch or so longer reach, has longer arms. Here's the question about Indongo. Is he a one-trick pony? He scored that big upset win a while back against Troianovsky over in Russia, right? To grab that IBF title. Burns has never been knocked out. He's lost fights, but he's never been stopped. He's a sturdy guy fighting in his home turf. Gonna have a big crowd there supporting him. Should be a really, really fun atmosphere. Can Indongo, who's gone to the Lions Den already and scored a win, was that a one-trick pony though? Was that a fluke punch where he grabbed that title? Or is there real substance to this guy? We're gonna find out. Frank Warren has done an awesome job with Ricky Burns, lining him up for titles like this. This is set up for Ricky Burns to win probably a decision and unify titles. And I get in trouble with a lot of the fans over there who love Ricky Burns, and I understand that. What's not to love with this guy? He's a hardworking, scrapper kind of a fighter. He's won titles in several divisions. But if you look at who he's beat for those titles, not the strongest multi-division champion, right? But if he unifies titles here, I mean, that takes him up another notch, because not only has he won titles in multiple divisions, now he will have unified titles. And again, if you look at, you know, the fine print, right, the gray area between the black and white, and you see what's behind those titles, not much, it's kind of thin, but on paper, that might put him in Hall of Fame area kind of talk for some people. Not for me. I wouldn't say that. He falls short of that in my opinion. But there will be people out there that say this guy's won the titles of multiple divisions and now he's unified titles. I would say pump the brakes on all that mess. If he wins this fight, the winner of this fight regardless has 2 titles. But the man in the division obviously is Terence Crawford, who already beat Burns. If Indongo wins this fight, I think it's better for the sport in the fact that Terence Crawford and Indongo could do a fight to unify all these titles. And I think that anytime you can do that, I'm not saying it sells, does big numbers, but Indongo is a guy who is willing to travel. No doubt he would come to Omaha, Nebraska. It'd be an easy fight to make, I think, politically. And obviously to do a sellout crowd there in Omaha, you know, maybe Terence Crawford could go back to Vegas and they could try to do something there in Vegas where those Omaha fans traveled pretty well before to see him fight in Vegas. I don't know. I just think down the line at the end of this year, a fight like that to unify everything makes sense. Now, if Ricky Burns wins and unifies these titles, is he going to want to fight Terence Crawford again? That didn't go so well for him the first time. If he would be willing to, Crawford would probably have to travel to the UK again, right? But that would be an exciting fight that would do big numbers. I just don't know if they'd want to do that. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. But all in all, I favor Ricky Burns by decision in this fight. We'll see if Indongo is the real deal or a one-trick pony. Now also Saturday on HBO Latino here in the USA, Sullivan Barrera is taking on Paul Parker. For those of you who don't know who Paul Parker is, don't feel bad. Paul Parker is 8-1 with 4 knockouts, mostly known for being KO'd by Vasyl Lomachenko in 2015. Funny enough, Barrera stopped Lomachenko by KO7 back in December. Barrera is 18-1 with 13 knockouts. His only loss was to Andre Ward, which is nothing to frown at. So you got to favor Barrera big in this fight. This is kind of a showcase fight for him. Stay busy fight. Cheap fight for HBO because HBO Latino, the licensing fees, a lot cheaper. So, you know, let's see what Sullivan Barrera looks like. Hopefully he doesn't move down to the level of his opposition. In the improvements we saw between his fight against Andre Ward and against Lomachenko, hopefully we see more improvements. Hopefully we see more climbing because I think he's still a player in that light heavyweight division. Let me know what you guys think. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'm Michael Montero. I'll see you at the fights.